Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have a great show for you tonight. Extensive hemp news segment, an interview, and as usual, we're going to start the show off right now with our infamous dancing cannabis leaves.
I feel the force.
First story tonight is a national story. President Joe Biden's new pick for a leading role in the United States Department of Health and Human Services is a strong ally of the medical marijuana community, the latest pro-reform selection to be named in recent weeks. Rachel Levine, who currently serves as Pennsylvania's health secretary, is being nominated for Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services. And the Biden transition team isn't shying away from her connection to medical cannabis, noting her expertise on medical marijuana in a press release released on Tuesday. The president's in favor of medical cannabis in addition to a number of other more modest reform proposals such as rescheduling, decriminalizing possession, expunging prior marijuana records, and letting states set their own policies. Given his ongoing opposition to date to adult use legalization, the cannabis mention on his website is noteworthy. Pennsylvania's Governor Tom Wolf reacted to Biden's selection by emphasizing Levine's cannabis work, noting that during her time in the state's health department, she, quote, was instrumental in establishing the state's medical marijuana program, bringing national awareness to opioid use disorder, and highlighting and promoting the need for adequate medical care and access for LGBTQ community, end quote. Biden's pick to lead HHS, California Attorney General Javier Becerra, is also in favor of cannabis legalization. The president also recently nominated former South Carolina Democratic Party chair and unsuccessful Senate candidate Jamie Harrison to lead the Democratic National Committee, and he's a strong backer of full marijuana legalization. Biden announced earlier this month that he wants Rhode Island's Governor Gina Raimondo to run the Commerce Department. Governor Raimondo came out in support of legalization a couple years ago, and she's released a budget for Rhode Island that proposes to call for state-run regulatory model for cannabis. For Attorney General, Biden's pick is nominating Judge Merrick Garland, who was unsuccessfully nominated for the Supreme Court by Barack Obama 4 years ago, but he has not been especially outspoken about his views on marijuana. In other positive news, the president also nominated civil rights activist Vanita Gupta as Associate Attorney General. She favors cannabis legalization and has strongly condemned harsh criminalization policies for nonviolent drug offenses. In the gem state next door of Idaho, Idaho's Republican State Senator Scott Grow on Monday in Boise, Idaho, introduced a constitutional amendment to prohibit psychoactive drugs, including cannabis, which would make it harder to legalize them in the future. The constitutionally mandated ban would include, quote, production, manufacture, transportation, sale, delivery, dispensing, distribution, possession, or use of a psychoactive drug, end quote, unless approved by the Food and Drug Administration and prescribed by a doctor. Senator Gross said, quote, the Idaho Constitution affirms that the first concern of all good government is the virtue and sobriety of the people. Neighboring states have legalized controlled substances to the detriment of their children, according to Senator Groh, to the detriment of their children, families, and communities. This constitutional amendment prevents the erosion of Idaho statutes which currently control these substances, end quote, Idaho's Representative Gross said in a statement of purpose accompanying the measure. This bill is really a Hail Mary passed by the Idaho legislature to stop the changes in marijuana laws they know are inevitable. Idaho is bordered by Washington State, Oregon, Montana, and Nevada, which have all legalized cannabis for adult use and legalized the sale of those substances. Idaho has yet to even legalize hemp, and on several occasions, state authorities have made arrests and confiscated hemp being hauled through Idaho. In 2019, Idaho's Governor Brad Little signed an executive order allowing interstate hemp transportation through Idaho. Constitutional amendments in Idaho require 2/3 approval from both legislative chambers before being put to voters as a ballot initiative. Seems unlikely that it will make it to the ballot. Seems more likely that medical marijuana legalization will make it to the ballot in Idaho in 2022. In Mississippi, medical organizations have joined a legal fight to overturn election results legalizing medical cannabis access. The American Medical Association, or AMA, and its state affiliate have filed a joint amicus brief urging Mississippi's highest court to reject a voter-approved ballot measure legalizing and regulating cannabis access to qualified patients. On last November's election day, 73% of voters in Mississippi decided in favor of Measure 65, which establishes a system of state-licensed dispensaries to engage in the retail dispensing of cannabis and cannabis products to patients who possess a doctor's authorization. Just prior to the vote, officials representing the city of Madison, Mississippi, including the town's mayor, filed suit arguing that the legislature's failure to update guidelines for petitioners should invalidate the initiative vote. Specifically, state statutes call for petitioners to gather an equal percentage of signatures from 5 congressional districts. However, following redistricting 20 years ago, there are only 4 congressional districts in the state. The lawmakers since that time have failed to update the statute. Nonetheless, the litigants have not similarly challenged the validity of a separate initiative that also appeared on the 2020 ballot or the validity of prior ballot measures, despite the fact that petitioners for those initiatives acted no differently than those who advocated for medical marijuana. Justices on Mississippi's Supreme Court have agreed to hear the case. Separate lawsuits in Montana and South Dakota are also seeking to overturn marijuana legalization election outcomes in those states. South Dakota's litigation was filed at the behest of the state's Republican Governor Kristi Noem. It's the Republican Party that is leading opposition to marijuana legalization. These are cynical attempts to undermine the democratic process. Legalization opponents have shown time and time again that they cannot succeed in either the court of public opinion or at the ballot box. Thus, they are now asking judges to set aside the votes of over 1 million Americans in a desperate effort to override undisputed election outcomes. Whether or not one supports marijuana legalization, Americans should be outraged at these overtly undemocratic tactics. The American Medical Association's position is woefully out of step with both public opinion and scientific consensus, as well as with the opinion of the majority of physicians. It's regrettable that this organization would go on record in an attempt to nullify the vote of a supermajority of Mississippi voters. Again, it was approved by 73% of Mississippi voters. There's some positive move across the river up in Washington State. A renewed effort in Washington State to allow adults to grow marijuana at home has had its first hearing in Olympia last week, with a House committee considering a bill that would permit individuals to cultivate up to 6 plants for personal use. Committee vote on the proposal is expected soon. Though Washington was among the first states in the nation to legalize commercial marijuana, growing the plant at home for recreational use remains a felony. Lawmakers have repeatedly rejected past personal cultivation proposals in the years since voters approved a 2012 legalization initiative, citing obstacles to enforcement and a worry that homegrown cannabis would be sold on the illicit market. If last Friday's hearing is any indication, however, this year could be different. Public testimony on the new homegrown bill, Washington's House Bill 1019, was relatively low-key, and most questions from lawmakers focused on minor details, such as how home grow would compare to home beer brewing and whether landlords should be able to prohibit plants in rental units. Representative Kloba, who chairs the committee, is among the sponsors of Washington's HB 1019. Since Washington voters legalized adult use marijuana via a ballot initiative in 2012, the issue of providing limited personal marijuana cultivation rights to adults has come up before lawmakers year after year. However, 2021 could be the year that this changes, as lawmakers this session are taking a more receptive approach to the concept of permitting home growing, a practice that's already allowed in the majority of legal states, 13 out of the 15 legal states. Permitting home cultivation would bring Washington's existing cannabis laws in line with the state's alcohol regulations. Washington citizens can brew their own beer and make their own wine for personal consumption, and it's consistent with this policy to similarly permit personal cultivation of cannabis. Passage of this legislation would bring Washington's law into compliance with those of other states that have enacted policies regulating the adult use of marijuana. Again, 13 out of 15 of which no longer criminalize adults who grow limited quantities of cannabis in private. None of these jurisdictions has ever repealed their home grow laws, and these regulations have not created any tangible public safety risk. Members of Washington's House Committee on Commerce and Gaming could vote to advance the bill as soon as this weekend, as an executive session is scheduled by the committee. On a national level, the sale of legal marijuana products rose by more than $7 billion in 2020. In all, customers purchased an estimated $18 billion in cannabis products from legal retailers in 2020, up from $10.7 billion in 2019. This includes sales from both medical use and adult use retailers. The spike in sale was in large part due to consumers purchasing greater quantities of cannabis per retail transaction than ever before. This shift began in March at the outset of the COVID-19 pandemic and held steadily throughout the remainder of the year. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, regulators in several states designated marijuana retailers as essential businesses, which permitted them to stay open under relaxed or in some cases new emergency rules intended to facilitate expanded customer access. As a result, several states reported an unprecedented volume of retail sales in the spring and summer. The largest marijuana sales were in the markets in 2020 were in California, Colorado, Washington, and Florida. 9 states more than doubled their 2019 sales totals. The dramatic rise in retail marijuana sales is not only a reflection of increased consumer demand, but also the result of many consumers shifting from the illicit market to the above-ground legal marketplace. As these state legal markets continue to mature and become more accessible, consumers are going to continue to gravitate toward it and away from the underground marketplace. Out of Miami, Florida, the history of marijuana use is not associated with an elevated risk of suffering from cardiovascular disease, according to data published in the journal Cannabis. A team of investigators affiliated with Florida's International University Herbert Wortham College of Medicine assessed the relationship between marijuana use and the diagnosis of cardiovascular disease in a nationally representative cohort of nearly 57,000 adults. The authors identified no independent relationship between marijuana exposure and the prevalence of cardiovascular disease after adjusting for potential co-founders such as body mass index, tobacco smoking, and alcohol use. The researchers determined, quote, after controlling for several confounding variables, we found that there was a decrease in the prevalence of cardiovascular events with marijuana use. They concluded, quote, our study found that there is no link to marijuana use and an increase in cardiovascular disease. Furthermore, there may be a link between marijuana use and lowered risk of cardiovascular disease, but the data was not statistically significant when adjusting for confounding variables, end quote. These findings are consistent with several other studies concluding that cannabis use is not independently associated with an increased risk of cardiovascular disorders. Separate data published last month in the same journal similarly reported that subjects with a history of marijuana use possess no greater elevated risk of atherosclerosis or hardening of the arteries. The results of a systemic literature review of 67 studies published in November in the American Journal of Medicine concluded, quote, marijuana itself does not appear to be independently associated with excessive cardiovascular risk factors, end quote. Although the authors did caution that, quote, it can be associated with other unhealthy behaviors such as alcohol use and tobacco smoking, it can be detrimental to cardiovascular health. This study, Association Between Marijuana Use and Cardiovascular Disease in U.S. Adults, appears in this month's edition of Cannabis. Our last story tonight's out of Los Angeles, California. Cannabis use is not associated with adverse outcomes following liver transplantation, according to data published in the journal Clinical Transplantation. The researchers from the Dumont UCLA Transplant Liver Cancer Center at the David Geffen School of Medicine assessed the impact of pre- and post-transplant marijuana use on liver transplant outcomes in a cohort of 900 patients. The investigators reported, quote, there were no statistical differences in post-operative outcomes, including patient graft survival and post-liver transplant complications in pre- or post-liver transplant users, end quote. The authors concluded these findings may help guide future policies regarding marijuana use in liver transplant candidates, although confirmation utilizing larger cohorts is warranted, end quote. And these findings are also consistent with the number of prior studies reporting that marijuana use is not contraindicated in patients receiving any organ transplants. Nonetheless, in several states, including some states that permit medical cannabis access, those with a history of marijuana use are ineligible to receive organ transplants, including here in Oregon and Washington. This study, The Impact of Marijuana Use on Liver Transplant Recipients, a 900-patient single-center experience, appears in this month's edition of Clinical Transplantation. Personally, I've known 100 patients who needed liver transplants, who were using medical marijuana, who were not allowed to go on the list for a liver transplant. They are all dead now. So they need to change this ridiculous policy, and this study supports that. Well, we'll be back in just a moment with our guest interview. I want to remind you, if you or a loved one need to find a doctor who can help you get a medical marijuana permit, we've helped hundreds and thousands of patients all across the country get their medical marijuana permit. We'd be happy to refer you to a doctor in your area, anywhere in the United States. You can call us at 503-235-4606. That's 503-235-4606. I want to thank you for watching and help us restore hemp. Good night.
As a young man in the early 1970s, Dronkers gradually began what was to become a lifelong quest to unlock the potential of the cannabis plant and to improve the quality of human life everywhere. Over the years, Dronkers has founded and continues to run various cannabis and hemp-related enterprises. Sensi Seeds has become the leading international seed bank and has been setting the standard for decades. This cannabis gene bank is responsible for preserving medicinal-grade cannabis strains approved and sold by the Bureau of Medical Cannabis, an organisation run by the Dutch government. Hemp flax, established in the mid-90s, is one of Europe's largest producers and processors of industrial hemp. The Hash Marijuana and Hemp Museum in Amsterdam was opened in 1985 and presents a permanent exhibition about the history and uses of the cannabis plant around the world. The museum has over 100,000 visitors a year. Last year saw the grand opening of the Hash Marijuana, Canyonó and Hemp Museum, located in the beautifully renovated Mornau Palace in the historical centre of Barcelona. Since 2004, the museum confers the Cannabis Culture Awards upon those who have distinguished themselves in the struggle for acceptance of cannabis in all of its forms.
I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce one of the premier warriors for cannabis on a global scale, Mr. Ben Dronkers. Ben, welcome to our show.
Thank you.
It's a real honor to have you on. We just have run the little video about who you are and how you helped found the oldest seed company. Tell me, how did you first get involved with cannabis? How old were you when you first tried cannabis? I always like to ask that question.
I just turned 17, and then a friend of mine, he got some, and we go to the bridge and we sit on the bridge, and I smoke like anything, and I did feel nothing, like
Right.
many people.
Anything the first time.
Yes, but it's so I, but the next time I get high right away. So
that was
yeah,
Holland.
it was. Sorry.
That was in Holland or the Netherlands.
Yes, in my city then where I lived then in Rotterdam actually.
Rotterdam, which is the main port of the Netherlands. It's
Yes.
it's right. Is it the mouth of the Rhine River?
Yes, it's at the end of the Rhine River. Yes, it's go all the way up.
So that goes all the way into Central Europe. So it's a main artery for Central Europe there. So you have a lot of cultural influences there. Holland reached all over the world. In fact, now are you in Sabah in Malaysia?
I'm in Borneo, yes, Sabah, Borneo in Malaysia.
Oh, okay. All right. And you've been living there for a few years.
Yeah, quite some time already. I come here already 15 years up and down. But after my retirement, I thought I'd rather live here than in Holland. I like the weather.
Yeah, the weather's a lot better, especially this time of year, I bet. I haven't been there,
Yeah.
but maybe someday. But so when you first tried marijuana, you were 17, and what drew you into, how did you go from first just trying cannabis to becoming a cannabis pioneer?
Well, of course, like you said, I live in Rotterdam, and there's a lot of ships coming from all over the world. So it was easy to find some marijuana there, and also hash. And of course, I was intrigued by what is this stuff and where it comes from. And but hustling a bit, like I go to Amsterdam, bought some hash or brass, go back to Rotterdam. My friends took part of it, so I smoke free. And then slowly, but anytime, we got busted. I got busted many times.
And how old were you the first time you were busted?
Oh, the first time I was busted with a piece of hash, that as a finger top, and it was really weird. But right away, after one night in jail, you go out again, and it's not even a court case. But after that, I was busted quite a few times, and it bothers me that, of course, the law was like that, because there was no harm to anybody, and only pleasure for the one who used it. There was no danger in it, and I learned that quite early. And then in jail, because I have to go to court, I started to read the law, especially what we call it, the opium law, the drug law.
Was this in the 1970s or the 1960s?
Oh no, that was in the 70s. Yes.
70s.
And then step by step, I learned more and more of the law. And the funny thing is, I was also invited by a professor in law because he liked my case, and he wrote a book that it is nonsense to make cannabis illegal. So he was on my side.
Who was that?
Remember, I'm sorry?
Who was that? Who?
Professor Hulsman.
Oh.
He's a beautiful man, and he always had the right way to say it. One of the things he used to say is, if a person by religion doesn't eat or drink what he wants, that is up to him. But for yourself as a free person, you decide yourself what you eat and drink and put in your body. And that was a very good statement. And he had a few of those. But because of, I become interested in the law. And then one time they busted me again, growing, you know, I was growing quite some in a small greenhouse. And I got busted for that. And I read the law again. And then I read that any part of the cannabis plant is forbidden except the seeds. And that keeps in my head, you know, so how you can have eggs without a chicken, you know? It's,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. How can you have the seeds without the flowers and all of
exactly.
that?
So the seeds are and still are legal, right? And also in the United Nations, in the treaties. But that time it was new. So I went to a specialist lawyer who was specialized in agriculture, and bloody expensive. But I wanted to know, so I go there and I have to pay. I remember 6,000 gilder. That's a lot of money that time. But in 2 weeks he called me, and I go to him and he say, "I think you're right. You should be legal to grow seeds." So I started, and my son Alan, who is a fantastic breeder, by the way, he go to the government office to say we're gonna do this hemp seeds, and they all starts laughing, you know, and like, oh, you're gonna do hemp seeds, and we had a greenhouse, a small greenhouse,
What year
and
was
I go
that?
to the police. Oh man, I don't remember, man. I'm very bad in dates, you know.
Right,
Early
right.
19 something, 92, 92. I forgot.
Okay.
Something. Um, But I go to the police station and the same thing, you know, I said, well, we're going to grow hemp seeds in this greenhouse. So if people complain that it is not marijuana, it's for hemp seeds. And the same thing, they're laughing. All right, we come and see. And they came by, even the police came to the greenhouse and they like it. They never saw, you know, they have no idea what cannabis was. So, but that is how I understood, you know, that instead of growing marijuana and getting busted all the time, you know, I just, hey, I can do seeds. And I did seeds legal. So I started to grow and it was quite all right. And then on a certain moment, I knew I can open a shop. And in the meantime, I knew Neville Shoemakers, you know, the
The
famous
brief.
guy who he used to send seeds to America. I never did, you know, I didn't. I knew it's too risky and it's forbidden. So I keep totally legal in Amsterdam with my shop, and you know, already in the beginning, a lot of people came to us, and it was nice, you know. It's amazing.
So
And then
how did you obtain your strains? You went all around the world, didn't you, to find
yeah,
various? Because you were like there's someone out there who will remain nameless who claims to be the strain hunter, but that when others were just thinking about it, right?
yeah, I did that in '72 until '78 or what. That I, especially in you know in Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, Morocco, Lebanon,
What were some
everywhere.
of the first strains that you specialized in? What were the first big
Yeah,
indica? Hmm?
yes, the indicas. The indicas I brought from Afghanistan and Quetta Valley, those places. It's amazing. And the difference was that when I come back and we really could grow them, we realized the quality of it, you know, and then from there on, Neville Shoemakers, the seed bank that time, we worked together. So I sold his seeds, he sold my seeds, and we sort of collaborated. And we also did some breeding, you know, some different varieties mixed up. And
So
that
what were
was
some of
interesting.
your strains that were the first ones that you developed that became heirloom or the start of the whole industry now?
Um, yeah, you know, Shakespeare said, "What is in the name?" But I have many names, but one of
Indica,
them is
right?
it is one of the names I really have still there is Shiva Shanti. That is named after my daughters. It's a twin daughter. One is Shiva, the other one Shanti. They are
Okay.
they just became 40 now, so that's
Okay.
about. And then we still have the plants. We still do the seeds as well.
Good,
Nice.
good. Today, how many different varieties does Sensi Seed Bank have available in Amsterdam?
Yeah, it's really amazing. It is so many that people don't realize how difficult it is and how much work it is to keep them going.
Yeah. I've never kept a seed bank going. I've kept clone banks going for a decade.
Yeah.
You know how difficult that is just with clones. But
Yes.
seeds at a whole much greater level of complexity with the way that pollen just floats through the air. So
Yeah. Of course, we also do clones. We do that already a long time.
right. Well, that's one way.
We were one of the first who did the cloning. Of course, a
Yeah.
lot of people claim that, but I learned that from a flowerist in a greenhouse in Holland.
Uh-huh.
And we just give it a test and it didn't work, and then test again, and the guy wouldn't believe that it couldn't work. So after maybe 5-6 times we try, it works. And since then we did the cloning. Robert Clark and David Watson, they know that.
Yeah, a couple of the seminal people in the cannabis industry. Robert.
Great guys.
Yeah. I don't really know them, but I've certainly read their books.
Yes. Yeah.
Or
Well, that was the interesting of Sensi Seeds, because after just a year open, 2 years open, we took over the museum. The Hash Marijuana Museum. It was just open. Some people like David Watson and Sam, what they call him, and Rosenthal were involved. But right away,
and Chris came there.
No, Chris came much later, but he worked with me. But right away, the police come. So
we have had a video on our show many years ago, visiting your cannabis castle. So that's in our archive. This is show like 1061. So,
the amount of varieties we have in the varieties also from the days from Neville Shoemaker, the seed bank, and then the Sensi seeds, and then after that, I met a guy from Russia, from the Vavilov Institute, and I met him before, and because we have the seed bank, he came there already, but I didn't know. And when the turnover from Russia happens, the Vavilov Institute was like vanishing. They didn't got funding anymore. So this guy came to me, and he a lot of seeds from the Vavilov Seed Bank.
Mm-hmm. And were those primarily hemp?
Also, he was still working on it.
Were those psychoactive varieties, or was it hemp?
Most of it hemp. So what happens is that I took over. I bought a lot of seeds from him, and then he still had a program to go all the way around north to south, from the north until nearly Turkey, collecting seeds. So I funded that as well. It is it is something what only maniacs do, because it is really, we got now about 1,600 varieties with Sensi. It's amazing, and it costs so much to really keep it. So we do our best, but it's not easy.
1,600 varieties. That's hard to keep 16 in it. I had 27 once.
Oh no, but we have a lot of small rooms, so we can still do a lot. But it is time consuming and work. It's a lot of work, and it's sometimes you lose one. And it's also happening.
So you open.
But anyway, it is.
So you took over the museum. That must have been in like the late 80s or early 90s.
No, the museum wasn't. It opened, and right away the police came and closed it. And then the owner, I was next to it. I had my Sensi seed bank next to it. The owner wanted to get rid of it. He wanted to stop it. So I bought it over. I paid him the money that he invests, and I go on with Ed. But it's actually me. I bought the whole thing, and Ed was still involved. So it was fun. And the museum and Sensi Seed brings people like from all over the world. We had so many American people coming over, so it's a lot. And that is how also I met, most of the people. It's George Cervantes, Lawrence Chaniak,
A lot of
so
other.
many. Yes, and it is amazing. You would see the same guy still going on, right? Steve D'Angelo, I remember it's 30 something years ago. He was already working with hemp in well, not 30, 25 something. He was working with hemp in Hungary. He made jeans there. Lousy quality, but he did it. And
Really?
it was
So
many.
hungry.
Well, Amsterdam was that time also become a sort of melting pot of knowledge, right? People meet each other. Also, we had a coffee shop in the corner next to the museum, to the seed bank, and so many people came there, and that brings a lot of seeds, of course. Also, and people, and we were quite selective. So it's, but if something was really good, of course. But it was an adventure, and the thing from one come the other, because from Sensi Seed in the museum, I see all the history, and I collect like crazy. And the more and more we see, like yourself also, we are the old guys now, and we're fighting already how many years. And just before the show, I thought, what the fuck what are we going to talk about? Because we repeat ourselves and we keep telling the story and we keep going on, like with Jack Harrer and all these people, and with Chris and Mickey Conrad. But now it is, happy the young people coming in. And what I realized also, it has to come, hemp has to get industrial. And that is not nice, but it has to do. That's the only way we can supply the world with this master of the plants. And it is the only way. So we do that, that with Hemplex, we're working like crazy. And we succeeded with the.
Yeah, I remember in Japan, you mentioned that you had started Hemp Flax 20 years before that, I guess in the mid 90s. And the first number of years, you lost $1 million a year before you started making money with it. Is that right?
Yeah, 25. No, I wish, we have 25 years now. Last year it was 25 years, and 24 years we lost, 24 years lost. So now it's just coming out. Actually, last year we just bought that make insulation, and that is working very well. And the CBD, beautiful quality. That sells also very good, and that makes us the money now. Now the money is coming a bit, but 24 years. He only lost so much money, but it was also so. Yeah, we sell already fiber to the automotive industry for 12 or 14 years. But
so when you grew hemp the first time, you didn't have a market, right? So who was your first customer? Tell us about how you had your first hemp fiber customer.
Well, we had a few small people. The herds was selling okay. The sheeps, that for the animal bedding, for horse bedding, that was okay. But the fiber was staggering up, and it's a beautiful story, because in the meantime, our government was always against me. They take away the subsidies, they try to close us, and all kind of details. But we hang on. But the fiber was staggering up, so on a certain moment, had 1,500 tons of fiber, and we couldn't.
A big mountain.
I'm sorry.
Our video froze up for a minute. Again, you're in Malaysia. I'm in Oregon, so there's a lot of satellites in between. So you had did you say 15,000 pounds or 1,500 pounds?
1,500 tons.
Kilos.
1,500 kilos, no?
Yeah, kilos. So that'd be about 30 1,000 pounds or 35,000 pounds. And so how did you sell that?
Well, we couldn't. And then there was one Turkish company, a paper company, who were interested, and they bought it. And, you know, and always they were scared that I was growing marijuana to smoke and not hemp. I sell it to a paper company, and they make cigarette paper, so they smoke all the hemp. You know,
Right.
they smoked it. It's amazing. And
But it
then
was
we
the
start
snap.
selling to the automotive. Yeah, and but after that we sell most of it. We sell to this company about 2, 3 times, and then after that we start to sell quite okay to the automotive industry. Mercedes, well, of course not directly, but to the subcontractors.
Yeah.
Mercedes,
So
Jaguar,
they're buying
BMW.
this hemp to make components in cars, the molding on the dashboard
Yes,
and in the side doors.
yeah.
That's become a huge market for you. By the way, many of our viewers don't know that even today here in America, all tobacco cigarettes are either rolled in hemp or flax paper. By law, uh, cigarettes have to be rolled in hemp or flax because wood-based paper
Oh,
is toxic.
well, I didn't know that. That's good.
Yeah,
Nice. Well,
now you do.
if they,
You know, I
if
sold
they
hemp.
need if they need fiber, they can come. No.
They get it from Spain. They get it from Spain. There's this importer in New Jersey. Frank Riccio was the old one back in the 90s who would import the hemp pulp from Spain to the 3 cigarette manufacturers in the United States, 2 of them in North Carolina and one of them, Kimberly Clark, in
Yes.
New Jersey. So
Well,
there's
I
another,
think it is mainly. I think it's mainly flax pulp though,
yeah.
because
They said it was at the
no,
time.
there's no hemp. There's some hemp growing in France, but and that is still going to the paper industry as well. That's true. Yes, they do
So
something.
uh, now uh, your hemp is used though for some very important paper in Europe, isn't it?
Yes, well, some paper companies they buy, but not much. But like I said, we opened the, installation like rock wool and whatever they got. And that is really amazing because everybody wants to be, and then we use this glass fiber insulation and rock wool insulation, and that is actually the new asbestos. It's very bad, and they, even the government stimulated and subsidized it to isolate your house with something that is the new asbestos. Well, now we make, since last year, we make hemp insulation, and it was
Great.
done already. We sold it already quite some time, but we were able to buy this factory that they quit. So and that was interesting because they were using only jute before, and now we're using hemp there, and it runs much better, and the quality is better, and it's nice. So we have finally we have the circle that we're looking for. You know, that you grow it on the field, and we grow now about what is it, 4,000-5,000 acres in Europe, in Holland, Germany, and Romania. We got a factory in Romania also, and it is nice if you circulate it. So what you produce go out. So we produce seeds, we make oil, we make CBD. Then we have the herds for the animal, and now we have a direct, also in our own hands, to go with the fiber. And if the balance is there, we have a circle of existence. You know, that is a beautiful circle that I made one time with Jack Harrer. We talked about it to see what it would do. You know, because if you use 1/3 of the crop for your energy, you have all the energy to do the rest of the crop. And you
Right.
know that is also so many possibilities. Like you and I, we know, but how we get it to the public, you know, it is so difficult to. You still people on the street. You have to explain hemp. Oh, you get stoned. You know, it's still the same. And luckily now, with younger people are more open to it, and they got more information. And I have to say, because of COVID, also a lot of things change in the way that the people look at sustainability and also
Yeah.
concerning food. You know, there's the
You're in
superfood.
the States. You know, our local governments have designated cannabis to be an essential industry. They want to make sure that that tax revenue keeps coming in. Earlier in the show, you know, I've been doing hemp news on this show going back 35 years, but we talked about how just last year there was $7 billion more in revenue in the marijuana sales. So we went from $10 billion in 2019 to 18 billion in 2020. So
Amazing.
yeah, it is.
Well, that is an economical factor, but the human factor is, I see that in the food. You know, the omega-3 and 6, it's an amazing superfood, and people need that. And you know, if we see what, you know, I see the local people fishing here and no fish. I see the farmers in Holland on soil that is not soil enough. So to have a sustainable product where you know, people don't know it. You say, hey, there's no insecticide or pesticides with hemp. What? Oh, yes. And they don't know that anything else, everything else, nearly, you know, 99.9% of the rest of things what we grow, farmers grow, use pesticides and insecticides. Right. And that hemp doesn't. So that is, and it gives the best superfood you can get.
That's true.
You know, we have we have this bondage with this plant already for, I don't know how many years. You know, it was what people don't know, that China didn't eat rice 800 years ago. They eat hemp.
That's right.
That is the thing. But
I went to China, and
yes,
until about 500 years ago, China, they called their country the country of hemp and mulberry. It wasn't the middle country, which is what they've called it for the past 500 years, since the Mongolians or the Qing dynasty. But they call it the land of hemp and mulberry. You and I got to visit during the International Hemp Environmental Forum in Kyoto back in 2016, several Shinto temples, and Shinto religion is deeply involved with hemp. That was a wonderful conference, and it was a real honor to meet you there, I must say.
No, it was fun. It was really nice. It was a journey never to forget. It was really nice.
True. Kyoto is an amazing city. And the fact that the Prime Minister's wife was there, Shinzo Abe, giving that talk was very incredible.
And very enthusiastic about the CBD. I think her husband used CBD. He got some prostate problems.
He just retired for the second time because of his ulcerative colitis. So he needs it medicinally. So at first you were growing it for the fiber. How much of your acreage do you grow for seed? Do you grow any that's both seed and fiber, or do you grow separately?
No, it is seeds and fiber.
At the same time?
Not all. I don't have the figures right away in my head, but I think it's about 1,000 acres seeds now. I'm not sure, to be honest. Maybe 2,000 acres seeds, and the rest is only fiber. In the north of Europe, you cannot grow seeds very well, so we do that mainly in Romania. Now, the nice thing in Romania is the soil is really like virgin soil. You know, it's very nice. So the quality of the seeds are also perfect. We use most of the oil. We use it to mix it with the CBD. So we produce a lot of, you know, again in the circle of what we do.
Yeah, we use the hemp oil to suspend the CBD distillate or extract. Huh, that's interesting.
We mix it up. Yeah. But it is a hard way and it's a long way, and the same thing for us, you know. We made a lot of money with Sensi Seeds. It's amazing. And our museum in Amsterdam was also doing very well, about 100,000 visitors.
So,
you know, times €9.
I guess it's been about 8-9 years now that your other museum opened in Barcelona, and you renovated a palace that the Catalonian people first founded their government in about, what, 200 or 300 years ago, right?
Yes. And it's amazing. It's a beautiful building. Huh? You've been there, right?
It's just a block off the waterfront in the old town of Barcelona. And just restored it in a fabulous way. And the exhibits are amazing. Just if anyone can get to Barcelona out there, I highly recommend you go there. Of course, the original one in Amsterdam is pretty good too. It's really good. The building, in cannabis history, the Amsterdam one is probably a little bit more significant, but in the history of Catalonia and Spain, the one in Barcelona is more historical.
Well, I bought the building quite cheap, and it took me about 9 years to restore it and do all the restorations. So every year I did something, because we needed the money for hemp again or something else. And that's what I'm saying. We made a lot of money, but we put it again where my mouth was, and let's try to do it.
Well, I want to thank you for that. Really a great place to visit. I hope to get back again someday. But so I first went to Europe and met you at the Cannabis Conference. It was 1998 in Cologne. We call it Cologne, but Cologne, Germany. I know you don't remember that, but
yes.
But we met again there in Japan. It was a little bit more memorable for you that I was both presenters there. I know that Chris Conrad put some of my hip paper in your museum in Amsterdam in the early to mid 90s. So I think that exhibit might still be there. I'm not sure, but I'm honored to
So
some of that there.
you should be in it.
Tell us about so most people don't know that the conferences that happen in Europe, the first one I met you at was the Cannabis Conference in Cologne. There are big ones in Switzerland and now in Spain. And at these conferences, you're like one of the main sponsors of all these things. I remember I went to the New York Cannabis Parade and spoke there about 5 or 6 years ago. And you've been sponsoring that every year for a number of years. And your booths are always like some of the biggest all across South America as well. When I visit Chile and Uruguay, you've helped start all of these events all around the world with your sponsorship.
Well, it's a matter of fact because I like it. And that is also that the first High Times Cup, in Amsterdam was actually not it was in Rotterdam. I had a very small restaurant there. And there we had the first 2 years, I think, for the Cannabis Cup. And then it went to Amsterdam. And it broke, a hippie dream or what. Afterward, it's an industry now. If you go to Cannabis in Barcelona or any other these fairs, that is amazing. It's how much, because after the seeds, people starting to sell fertilizer. They start to sell books and they start to sell grow lights and the grow shops came. And now it is an industry, and I love it. It's great. And you were.
Yeah, how did you first find out about him? And I know Jack came over to the High Times Cup, Jack Harrer, our mutual friend. I know I told you that he wrote the first edition of his book in my house right here in Portland back in 1985.
Well, then you know also that he had a lot of information from Hans-Joachim Beer, the German guy, you know that? And
yeah.
Beer was also a friend of mine, crazy guy, but amazing. Beautiful collections he had also. And he was also giving a lot of information about hemp. So the hemp came out of the museum because when I was in the museum, when the exhibition that's there, and people have all kind of questions, and the same like we can answer 99% of the questions if they're not too difficult, right? I'm not a scientist, but one answer I couldn't answer is every time they say, if like this, and what you say that hemp is like that, why nobody doing it? And that's the question. I think, fuck. And then we make millions. So I bought this flax factory because hemp and flax is quite near to each other. So I just go for it. And from there on,
the rest is history.
We spent millions and millions and yes, but we prove it. So that is really nice, that we were not the idiots what they say we were, right? That is probably the same thing. We were the idiots, the smokers. It was all about smoking and that's it. And now it's
yeah. And while smoking is fun,
it is.
I prefer it goes much deeper as the oldest crop, as we were talking about earlier. It could be the foundation and probably is, as Carl Sagan speculated in his book, of agriculture itself. And so it's something that we have co-evolved with, and we need that to continue, especially to replace for cutting down our forests. We don't have any left. and to replace the, instead of pumping carbon out of the earth into the atmosphere,
Yes.
we can grow
Yeah.
our hemp, seed oil and buy and alcohol.
They cutting trees now in Canada and America, ancient forest. I don't know my English is I'm Dutch now, but ancient forest. They're cutting it down, shredded it, dry it, make it into pellets, put it in big tankers, and transport it to Holland, and where they burn it, and they call it green fuel. It is, and and I tried to find out. Try already to find out for 7, 8 years how much they pay. They got billions or so. And around the corner, we sit there with the factory. The farmers have so much land. If they get a fair price, you don't have to cut the trees. They just can do it. There's no way with journalists, with the media, you to go through it. It's insane.
Yeah, we are robbing.
And so I know the fuels.
And
Yes, but it is the same thing.
Information and these subsidies that should be illegal, and hopefully
Yes. Yes.
So we're bring our show to an end. We're about done. Is there anything? I want to have you back on again sometime in the future, Ben. I really want to thank you for coming on here tonight. It's about midnight where I'm at. I know it's just like 3 or 4 in the afternoon there, but I want to. Is there anything you want to say in closing?
No, just I love you. I really admire all your work, what you've done. And I hope that young people who look at this, they find a way, we have to go to the mainstream. We have to get to the people to understand all these things. What you and I, we're saying that we're talking about it already 40 years or something. And now it's time people's eyes open, and that's, it's really time now with COVID and now with the economy, with food that's going this really like shit food all over the place, and we can hemp, hemp hooray.
And we want to
always said
to its proper place. I really want to thank you, Ben. Thank you for your lifetime of work in helping spread the word. I look forward to having you back on the show sometime and maybe seeing you in person out there on the Hempen Trail.
That will be great. I hope to see you soon. And anytime you. Bye.
I'll break that volcano out again. I know it kind of freaked people out having it there in Kyoto. People thought I was crazy, and maybe I am. But there we go.
Beautiful people there. Thank
All right.
you, Paul.
Thanks, bro. You have a good night.
Bye.